Let's go to this, actually, because I wanted to talk about this. Because today, Chuck Schumer posted on his Twitter account. I'm unsure. Was there an announcement from him, like a actual, like, did he show up somewhere and announce his?
Well, the vote was today and it passed, but Schumer put out a statement saying that.
Why he? Okay, yeah. So Chuck Schumer voted against the USMCA, which is Trump's trade deal. And his reasoning for not voting for this trade deal, the trade deal that Sherrod Brown and Elizabeth Warren, and I believe who else on that stage? Sherrod Brown wasn't on the stage, obviously, but he's one of the major backers of it because of his workers, his union bona fides. Who else? Klobuchar, right. So Chuck Schumer says the reason he didn't vote for it is because it doesn't address climate change. That is, I mean, does that sound like Chuck Schumer to you usually? I mean,
that sounds like something Bernie Sanders said a few nights ago.
The greatest threat facing our planet, Chuck Schumer wrote.
Wow.
I mean,
bend the knee.
Right. I mean, I wonder if he's worried about a 2022 primary from someone. I don't know. Maybe someone who hosts this show.
Another maybe Jewish person in Brooklyn.
Or maybe he's worried about AOC looking at the Senate. But that is huge. That is huge.
Yeah, maybe the Baileys have joined the Sunrise Movement. We should remind people this is how it was, at least Warren and Sanders' part was at the debate recently.
Trade. Senator Warren.
Well, they are the same in this issue.
Senator Warren, you support...
We should just point out that when Bernie says they are the same in this issue, that was right after the Iowa reporter said, Bernie, we're not talking about climate change. We're talking about trade. So maybe she should tell it to Chuck Schumer as well.
Right.
On trade. Senator Warren.
Well, they are the same in this issue.
Senator Warren, you support the USMCA. Why is Senator Sanders wrong?
I do. I wasn't here. I've been in Congress long enough to have voted against NAFTA, but I led the fight against the trade deal with Asia and the trade deal with Europe because I didn't think it was in the interests of the American people, the American workers, or environmental interests. But we have farmers here in Iowa who are hurting, and they are hurting because of Donald Trump's initiated trade wars. We have workers who are hurting because the agreements that have already been cut really don't have enforcement on workers' rights. This new trade deal is a modest improvement. Senator Sanders himself has said so. It will give some relief to our farmers. It will give some relief to our workers. I believe we accept that relief. We try to help the people who need help, and we get a better trade deal. We need a coherent trade policy. We need a policy.
Yeah, I mean, let's. The thing that really bothered me when Klobuchar said something similar to about how Trump's trade policies are terrible and that's why we need this. I mean, they're literally saying that Trump's trade policies are terrible. We need to vote for this Trump trade policy. I mean, that's literally what this is. So yeah, good for Chuck Schumer for, I guess, becoming inspired by Bernie Sanders. And
Bernie bro Chuck Schumer.
Right. And literally using a very Sanders-esque reason for voting against this trade deal. How many people, what was the vote? What did the vote come down to?
Final vote right now?
Yeah. Just interested in seeing how.
Here's what Bernie said about this thing. And I think his framing was right, which is that not to get into or you're really going to be against the 50,000 or however many jobs that this would supposedly save, and say, actually, this won't go nearly far enough in addressing how many jobs have been hollowed out of this country. I think this might include it here.
It's with your statement that people think this is going to be a great job creator. This is a modest improvement over what we have right now. It would allow, hopefully, Mexican workers to organize into unions, independent unions, and be able to negotiate decent contracts. I don't agree with.
That's the positive thing there.
Right.
That was a pro-Warren person that clipped that, I guess.
So it passed 89-10 with the 10 people who voted against it as Pat Toomey, Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, Ed Markey, Jack Reed, Bernie Sanders, Brian Schatz, and Chuck Schumer, and Sheldon Whitehouse.
Wow.
So it is a lot of like Green New Deal kind of adjacent people.
Booker, Gillibrand, and Harris voting against it.
Yeah.
I mean, and I got to tell you, 10 is that's disappointing. How do Democrats just not like that's one of the things. I mean, that's completely like that's if you want to see plain as day the difference between Democrats and Republicans will 100% stand together just to make the Democrats lose. They won't hand them a win, even if it would be good for their constituents. That's not even the analogous thing in this scenario, but what we're seeing is that how many Democrats, that was what, like 30-something Democrats then voted for this? That is ridiculous.
They're addicted to say they can work across the aisle, at least on one thing or something.
They're the party of good government. Which, like, regardless of policy, it's like this guest that we just had, who's like, there are certain questions that just aren't asked in terms of outcome or, underlying reasons why.
I mean, Harris, Gillibrand, and Booker voting against it, and Warren voting for it is insane.
Not a good look,
Yikes.
as certain people like to tell me about certain things.
Yeah.
So, not a good look.
I mean, hell, Bernie should have. I think Harris came out and said she wasn't going to vote for it before the debate. Bernie should have brought that up on stage. He should have said, Kamala Harris stands with me on this one. I think, he would have, maybe the K-Hive would have, yeah, right. But
I mean, what is the best policy on trade? Because this has been a conundrum for a lot of people on the left, and I'm still a little confused about it, and I would like to get your take. I mean, I have some ideas.
Right. I mean, for me, it's, a good trade policy would obviously center climate change in this day and age, obviously, which it doesn't at all. I would say that it would also be one that focuses on workers around the world and not just those who are in the country that we are living in.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Because, okay, a lot of the right-wing reactionary badness that we've seen around the world is on some level a reaction to neoliberalism and globalization. We know that globalization is bad. We know as long as we have, national borders within this, it's going to pit workers from different countries against one another in a race to the bottom. We know that it enforces austerity and cuts to the welfare state all over the world. But the answer to it is not this kind of Brexit politics that we've seen coming out of, well, particularly the UK, but we've seen some kind of Brexit-y politics coming from Trump as well. This idea of economic protectionism as a shelter from the world market, and the idea that we can bring the jobs back and live in this kind of autarky where the US makes everything that it needs. Like, that's a fantasy as well. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And it often leads in some very racist and xenophobic directions.
Right.
And, we have left-wing parties all over the place saying, well, we're for some economic protectionism, free movement of people, restrict the movement of capital. But it just seems like an insufficient answer to this problem. Like, I know how I would solve the problem in the long term, right? A global socialist revolution overthrowing the bosses. But in the short term, like, what is the best left populist position on trade? Because even some of Bernie's policies seem to be a little bit protectionist.
Right. I honestly do not know. I know what's bad and what's not enough.
I don't think.
But in terms of what would be the perfect, I don't even know if it exists.
I mean,
because-
I just keep coming back to empowering an international workers movement, like you said.
Yeah, I wouldn't conflate all protectionism with sort of the Brexit, what's going on with Brexit. But I think. I got distracted by. I think what needs to be done is kind of what's in what Bernie was touting, which is that you need to focus on workers' rights wherever they are, so then you can avoid more of the race to the bottom thing. That's obviously not going to happen under a trade deal that any Republicans sign. You need to make trade deals that aren't mainly about intellectual property protections, which is what most of this stuff is. the Trans-Pacific Partnership was basically like how to set up a court system for corporations to like adjudicate things about, and then sue countries if they try to do anything about labor rights, right? That's obviously awful. But I think you definitely need like some sort of state enterprises on certain things, and that's where in trade talks countries get upset at you, because why are you putting all this, like say China, for instance, has poured all this money into state like rail technology. And so they have high-speed rail all across the country. Meanwhile, we've been doing, cash for clunkers because the auto industry has such a hold over politics. Like, I think you do need a bunch of that sort of, and I don't know that necessarily is protectionist. Like maybe China was sourcing contracts worldwide for those trains, but you need to do stuff like that where you're pumping money into people's pockets at the same time as defending their rights as workers. And I don't know, like it's nice that Bernie cited that as a good thing for the USMCA, but I don't know.
Right. Let's go to the phones again. We got a lot of calls.